Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope you've had a great weekend or having a safe start to this week. This is going to be the second sort of Q&A response video, so just my responses to your questions, which I really appreciated. They were interesting, they were very kind-hearted. A number of them I discussed with my wife, sometimes at length. So here we go. These are less sort of what's your favorite, fill in the blank and tell us why, and more, a lot of these were just a little bit more involved, so which I appreciated. So let's jump in. I believe we're leading off with Brian at Bookish asking, how fast do you read? About a page a minute. It depends on the text. Some texts I can read more quickly, some, at a much slower rate. And he wants to know, how do you find time for so much reading with kids and a teaching job? Well, I do almost all of my reading at night after my daughters go to sleep. And sometimes my wife and I will both read sort of together, and then if she goes to sleep I might read a little bit longer, but I usually read for an hour or an hour and a half every night, and then slightly more on the weekends. I probably bump up, so I do a lot of my poetry reading out loud to my daughters as part of their bedtime story and stuff, so that's kind of how I kind of get through books at a better rate. He also wanted to know if there was a book that I loved and my wife hated, or vice versa, and we could not think of any. We really discussed this. I don't even think there's anything more than, like, on a 5-star scale, there would be anything more than a 2-star separation between books. We both read a lot of crime fiction. I probably read more like dramatic works or maybe classics, and she reads a little bit more contemporary, like literary fiction, but we have similar tastes. Too Tight Lautrec asked, have you come out as a booktuber to students at high school? A few, none in my current classes, in part because we just met actually face-to-face this past week on Tuesday. Before that it was all online. So there are a few from the previous class of 2020, who are aware. I think there's one former student who subscribes. But yeah. What's the first book that really rocked your world? So I have two that jump to mind. One is The Buck Stops Here, which was a big hardback picture book with a rhyming couplet for each of the U.S. presidents up to George H.W. Bush, I believe was the last one there. So this must have been in the late 80s or early 90s that it was published. Anyways, I had that. I memorably got a paper cut on it. It was a gift, and so I was flipping through it. I thought it was really cool as a 4 or 5-year-old child, and I got a paper cut on it. The other one, though, would be, this is my copy of Watership Down, which was my favorite book as a child. It's the only book I've read in every decade of my life. The cover is gone, but all the text is here, and I still adore this book. So, there we go. I loved the rabbits. I didn't get the whole allegory, but you could tell right from wrong, and the idea of individual strength and a community as a whole. I loved it as a kid. I still love it as an adult. Vontra Stellar asked, is there a special book you have given to your wife as a gift / to your children? Well, I'll give my children first. So this is a copy of My Father's Dragon by Ruth, Stiles, Gannett. And this was my father's favorite children's book when he was growing up. So this is the copy he had for my younger siblings and I. And it's the copy I now have for my daughters that I've read to them. And notoriously, there's a scene with a whole group of tigers. And I was reading it out loud to my older daughter when she was just a baby, and I was doing a different voice for each of the tigers. And my wife, and I had different voices for other characters, but that one I really was working through. And my wife had come home from the hospital and was thought I was having a conversation with multiple people. I was very confused. So this one it's a fun book. And then with my wife, one of the things we really like is, it's called the David C. Driskell series of African American art. And this is the Keith Morrison volume. The cover alone is outstanding. But these books are fantastic. I wanted to just show a couple of pictures. So you get really great pictures that show up, but then there's a lot of text around sort of the writer and or the artist, and really great fun books. And this is a volume that I really enjoy. She really enjoys. We don't have all of them. We have, I believe, 5 of them, and really enjoy them. Jumping back, Hannah's books. So Hannah asked, some questions around parenting. What have you loved the most? What do you find most challenging? What surprises you? So I think that one of the things I love is just being able to share the world and life and joy with my daughters. I'm one of those people who I try to be fairly positive and optimistic. There's the joke about, do you see the glass as half full or half empty? And if it's not even half full, we'll get a different glass. So I really try to find the aspects of the world that are really exciting and interesting and uplifting, and share those with as many people as I can. It's part of why I like to talk about books that I enjoy and learn from on this channel. So I really enjoy hiking with my kids. We run around together. We do family dance parties. I really enjoy board games. My older daughter will actually play board games, and she's developing strategies now at 4.5 to use and sometimes win games. So I really enjoy all of those things. I enjoy just seeing what makes them curious and what makes them happy, and just their emotions. I've learned so much from them. I'll just give one example. One of the lessons I learned from my older daughter was, as we would go around walking and things like that, she would find little rocks and she'd want to pick them up. And the attitude, of course, is, it's just another rock. There's 1,000 rocks right there just like it. That's sort of the adult attitude. And her attitude was, this rock is very special. I find something special about this rock. There's something about it that is different from all the other rocks, whether it's the shape or the color or just where it was at that moment. It's special to her, and because it's special to her, that rock actually she imputes value and to a certain extent dignity to that rock in that moment. And I realized that's how I need to be approaching human beings, and really we all do. That this was something I spoke about in my church at that time, but I just said what do we do to uplift, edify, and give dignity to someone else? How do we look, and rather than seeing the missing all the trees in the forest, being able to find a special tree in the same way she finds that special rock, find someone and lift that person up, give dignity to that person, find what makes that person tick, what makes that person valuable, what we can learn from that person, and that's an important way to be going through the world. So the challenges, of course, are constantly recognizing that my daughters are 2 and 4, that even though my older daughter this week was asking, what does the word dossier mean, and has figured out general cause and effect, she's a 4-year-old. And so no matter a child's vocabulary, the emotional development is still that of a 4-year-old. And so it's just really fun to spend time with my daughters. I love them very much. Let me see, who asked? So Trey Smith asked a question about doing the full Proust questionnaire, which I think would make this video 40 minutes long. However, I want to put this out there for anybody who will be interested. I love In the Shadow of Young Girls in Flower. I read Swan's Way earlier this spring. I'm going to be reading this before the end of the year, and the week that I finish reading this book, I will do the Proust questionnaire, I think, as a tag on that Tuesday, and try to tag a couple of people to do the Proust questionnaire. And I'll probably include the little link in Wikipedia that lists what his responses were. I will try to be less self-serving in my own. But Trey, that's a great idea, and I'm hoping to kind of push that out as sort of a tag for lots of people to do the questionnaire. All right, so let's talk then about the heavy details, the real heavy stuff. Bill Rutenberg, fellow educator, wants to know, as a teacher, how has remote learning affected your reading habits? Remote learning did not hinder my reading habits at all. In fact, I had about 30 minutes more each day because I didn't have a commute. And so I was, maybe reading for some of those 30 minutes. Hybrid learning from the last week has massively affected my my reading to the extent that I have one really large, heavy book that I'm working through, just 20, 30 pages a day, and then I'm working through different essays, short stories, sort of just whatever I have time for. And that's something I picked up sort of before even becoming a parent, but certainly as a parent was, there are going to be days where I don't have time to sit and just be reading for a sustained period of time through like a really intensive book, and that just sitting down and reading a short story that day or an essay that day or some poetry is a really good way to help my mind stay on the wavelength it needs to be. So yeah, remote learning, no effect. Hybrid learning, massive effect. And the second question, how do you set up your classes as a remote teacher? Well, I teach an alternative high school, so I have students who are, some of them are at our school because they want a sort of more small school feel. Others are there for a variety of programs, whether it's special education, whether it is they're refugee students, they're students who need sort of a lot of supports for whatever reason. There's some of the students, we have a teen and adolescent parenting program at our school. So a number of our students are teen parents who are working to graduate from high school and are outstanding students and human beings and parents. I have a little competition around the Dad's Reading Challenge and stuff, dads reading to their babies, and it started 3 years ago when I came to that school. So with that, I recognize students have a lot going on. So I do a pre-recorded video for each of the lessons where I'm going to deliver new instruction. It's usually between 5 to 12 minutes. I try to keep it closer to like 7 to 10. So I do that for any student who can't be in the live lesson. That's up. I do my live lessons with students. We have both Google like Drive and then Schoology, which is a learning management system. I can sort of house everything in there. But I do live lessons with students, and I'll work through notes with them, but also we have discussions. There are discussion boards for students who might be not able to participate in the lesson at that time because they're either working, they're helping their younger siblings, because this is high school, so they're helping their younger siblings get started, and then they join my lesson. But I try to make it, my math classes, I try to make as application and real world based as possible. So it might be discussion boards around what's an example of this relationship in the real world. What type of analysis would you be doing with it? Anytime I have practice, I try to make that something that can be auto scored, so a kid can do that anytime, or they can sort of self score, and then they can get a second attempt on it rather than just click submit and it's done. And I try to give feedback to students. Now, hybrid learning is a little bit different because I still do the pre-recorded lessons. I have autonomous pieces in there, but I set up sort of a fortress of solitude where I have a camera showing everything I'm doing on the board. I have a computer set up with the Google Meet going on, and I can see the live chat for all the students who are in the live lesson but are virtual, and then I can also see all the students who are in my room. And then I do a modeling approach, so we have like pipe cleaners where we'll bend the pipe cleaners to match like the relationships we see on graphs. We do a huge amount of like data analysis and graphing to discover the math relationships that sort of underlie reality in the universe. And so we'll like bend the pipe cleaners and stuff, and then you can use like a dry piece of spaghetti to model like the rate of change on those. So it's not exactly what I would be doing. I would make it much more, I have it much more hands-on if I didn't have to clean everything. So every kid has like their pipe cleaner, their dry erase marker, because they can write on the desks, or the tables, they can write on those, and then the dry erase, comes off. The first time I always write on a desk or a table, it used to terrify kids. They would think I was going to get fired, and then I'd be like, no, you just dry erase it. But this year they all have their own marker. I just gave them to them. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And the results are working. So this is the alternative high school. Normally the students have few, like their prior academic experience have not been as strong as like the honor students at the comprehensive schools. However, we got our results back this week from first quarter, and our Algebra 1, so I teach the advanced classes, and then I have one section of Algebra 1. Our Algebra 1 at our school beat the district average from quarter 1, which has never happened. I have all of the on-level students. My section beat the district average those students beat it by 9.1 percentage points. which is unheard of. And so we were celebrating, and those students are working extraordinarily hard. They are fantastic, and so their resilience inspires me every day. But Bill, if you have questions, we can definitely email, and like happy to help you create the classroom you want, if I can. I don't know. Thinan or Tina, I'm not sure how to pronounce this. In what ways has reading helped your teaching? How has teaching changed for you this year? So this year, again, I have to spend more time prepping and recording everything so that kids can view it whenever they have a chance to. In terms of reading, I think part of it is just finding examples, keeping my vocabulary at a high level so that hopefully I can impart some of that to students and get them to also use a nice, full, rich vocabulary as they describe the world and their analysis of the world. Let's see. I think that's... So Alan Braswell asked, was there any particular person who got you interested in reading the ancients? My dad, probably for the most part. He was really interested in that, and he had a National Geographic subscription when he was in high school, I think even. So there was just plenty to dig into there, and we would talk about it and stuff. And then, just curiosity, I think, beyond that. And then how much theology have you studied? So I've never formally studied theology. I am a Christian, and so in the sort of the specifically southwestern United States with Protestant traditions, there's a sort of expectation that like lay members, people who aren't like ordained or have not done formal studies, still study the Bible or can study theology and have great ideas from that. And so I am very much part of that tradition, and so I have read the Bible multiple times. I read each year like different sort of scholarly and also more like popular analysis works or commentary works within Christianity, because that's sort of my belief system. That said, I also explore the major world religions and try to find wisdom across humanity. I think that's very valuable, and I would say sometimes my perspective is informed by that. For example, the famous parable of the sower. If anyone's not aware of it, there's a sower who goes and sows seed on road, on among thorns, among rocks, and then on good soil. And there is an explicit interpretation there around, okay, this is what the rocks represent, this is the thorns, what the thorns represent, this is what the roadside where the birds are represents. But I approach that passage, and again, I've spoken in church on this, from a sort of active perspective of, if that message goes to an audience that includes rural farmers, they're going to recognize that you're not intentionally going and just tossing seed everywhere. But if you have a part of your landscape that is rocky, if you want to plant there, you go and dig out the rocks. If you have thorns and weeds there, before you plant there, you can tear up the thorns. And so there's this idea of, turning the swords into plowshares and doing some work and having sort of an active perspective about what our work on earth should be. And that's sort of the approach I try to take. I kind of joke about being a spiritual humanist of, if humans are created in the image of God, then everything I do should be to try and find that part, that sort of divine spark within each human being I interact with, and try to lift that up or be lifted up by someone else. So that's sort of the approach I take, if that makes sense. And I'm not always successful with that, but I really do try. And then Jason at Byways and Bookland, I think this is the last question. Tell us a bit more about your running, and then have you ever been overseas? And where would you like to go beyond his fabulous library, which I've even talked to my wife and said, if we hit Ireland, we could totally stop by, Jason. I think she would be more than happy to meet you. She's seen some of your videos. We went for our second anniversary to Rome, Florence, and Venice and spent about 3 days in each, and absolutely loved it. Absolutely adored that trip. We have not traveled overseas since then. I would be pretty open to traveling almost anywhere once that becomes possible sometime in the future. And I really would. I think there's so much just to appreciate and learn, whether it's sort of natural wonders or, current beautiful cultures and the food that you can find in places, or more ancient cultures and what remains of those to appreciate. I'm fascinated by all of those. I'll close with running. So I've experienced success and absolute failure both as a runner and as a coach. I coached for 8 years. Yeah, 8 years. I coached cross country and track and field, and started both programs at the second school I taught at, and just absolutely loved those. I'm currently not coaching in part because I want to spend time with my kids, but I go running, and I have not run competitively since I was 17, but growing up I ran track and field and cross country. My best friend was an incredible athlete in elementary and middle school, to a degree that if you've heard of the decathlon where they have like the 10 events, for younger kids, they have the pentathlon. And one of the things I trained at was the 1500 meter, which was the last event of the pentathlon. So I would train all season for that, and then when we would go do the pentathlon, my best friend would use me as his rabbit and then crush me in the final 200 meters. And he was the USATF national champion in the pentathlon when we were in 8th grade. I was not. I was his rabbit at the state meet. But when that's happening, you have to continue to work harder and harder and harder and harder. And so eventually, I grew quite a bit taller. I was not a tall person through 7th grade. I was not a tall person. Then I grew fairly tall as sort of a sophomore and junior. I had stress fractures my sophomore year, so I ran very poorly, like at the state championship, but just sort of the last guy there. But my junior and senior year, I was very good at track and field. I did not run in college, in part because when my father passed away when I was 16, I sort of recognized I didn't want to be like going out of state to college. I wanted to stay close to my family, and I was not good enough to run at Division I, like university track and field or cross country in the United States. But I was quite good. I ran the half mile and the quarter mile, and then the relays, the 4x800 relay and the 4x400 meter relay. Those were sort of my main 4 events. I would do other stuff, and I've coached everything except for pole vault. But that was sort of like when we were going to score points and win an invitational. That's what I competed in, and I messed up the 2 outer muscles of my quadricep in the district meet, the regional meet, a week before the state championships, my senior year of high school, and that was sort of the last competitive running I did in track and field. I still do road races. I have a lot of fun with those. There's a great race in Phoenix, the Phoenix 10K, that's been around for over 40 years. There's the Pancake Run north of Phoenix, in North Phoenix, that's also been around for 40 years. And so those are 2 that I do every year, except I won't this year. My daughters have done the diaper derby at the Pancake Run and have been outstanding. I've done the 10K with like each of my daughters in the stroller at different times. So I still run. As a coach, I'll tell 2 hopefully brief stories. The last year I was coaching at the first school I coached at, we were defending the 4x400 meter boys state championship, and we had 3 guys returning, and then we had a 4th who was sick, so we had to put someone else in. Well, so we decided to concede the first leg and basically say we're going to give all the other teams a head start, and then we're going to gamble that the 3 experienced runners will be able to catch up and run down all of the other runners. And those 3 guys ran the races of their lives. And our anchor caught up. I mean, the gaps were enormous. He ran a 49-second 400-meter race as a junior in high school, caught the anchor of the first-place team, and lost in a photo finish. The very next year, I started a program at the new school I was teaching at, and we were in this, it was the same situation. Except we were the team they were trying to catch at that school. And we held them off in a photo finish. And it was just, they're announcing it, and they announced, third place, and then they announced second place, and it wasn't us, and we knew we'd won. And the kids were so happy, their parents were so happy. I think I punched through my hat. I was so happy. So it's great. I love helping kids become active. I had the honor to coach a number of state champions and just see like their growth, their improvement. And what was really cool is one of the athletes I coached from his freshman year to his senior year, after I stopped coaching, he had graduated and was in college. He came back and was an assistant coach for the program. And so just seeing those types of things is always really exciting. So these were some longer stories for the Q&A, but let me know what you think. And I'll be back sometime this week. Stay safe, everyone.